In this video I will continue to comment die Wissenschaft der Logik and the Einleitung, which is the introduction, Allgemeiner Begriff der Logik, the universal concept of logic. But because I am an empirical individual and I am inhabiting a body and I am determined by the experiences of the empirical individual that you see, I am not yet in a position to produce a purely rational, purely logical speech freed from all the imperfections and the tainted aspects brought about in it by the empirical presence. I am not capable of being purely rational, and I need images, representations, anecdotes, personal experiences to make sense of the pure logical flows of pure thought. And I would like to begin by quoting a passage from the foreword. I don't know how it's in English. The word that the publisher or the editor writes after the end of the book, postface. I don't know how to say it in English. And it's a comment about Gottlob Frege ideography, Schrift, Begriffsschrift. Yeah, it was an attempt to reshape former logic. So the history of logic is fascinating because for more than 2,000 years, from the formal birth of logic with Aristotle's Organon until the attempt to reshape logic by Hegel, Kant and Hegel noticed that since the times of Aristotle, so between the 4th century BC and the 18th century AD, logic had undergone few changes in the formal presentation, in the rigorous aspect, in the clarity and the structure, but fundamentally it had remained the same. It was still good old Aristotelian logic, and Hegel attempted to reshape completely logic to make it a theology and an ontology, and to completely modify logic. And Hegel's logic is an ontotheological theory. It's the theory of being, of God, and of logic as being a process of flowing one into the other. And yeah, so I have many books about logic in my library, and I'm always amazed and amused. It's kind of comical that in the modern books of logic, which modern logic, symbolic logic, was founded in the 19th century by the works of Frege, notably, and Peano, I think, and then it was modified and refined by Russell and partly Whitehead in their attempt to found logic and mathematics and arithmetic upon the principle of logic, to unify mathematics and logic. And then there was Wittgenstein and Carnap and the Circle of Vienna and the analytic philosophers. So modern logic is symbolic logic. So we have three types of logic at least. We have good old Aristotelian logic, Hegelian logic, and modern symbolic logic. But the problem is, if logic is the speech about the truth, there should be only one logic. And my attempt is to show, I will not be able to do it today or even in the coming days. It's a long process, but to show that everything that we call true or logical has its ultimate foundation within Hegel's logic, because as I will show, Hegel's logic is the attempt, and I guess it is successful, to be the foundation of everything that which we call true or logical. And therefore, because that's Spinoza, which says that truth is index sui et falsi, truth is the proof of itself and the the truth is itself and its opposite, because by having a standard of truth, you also have a standard of falsehood and error, and yeah. So Hegel's logic is the logic of truth, but also the logic of error, and the logic of its pure rationality, which contains within itself irrationality. And what is irrational can only be understood in relation to what is rational, because, like I said, rationality and truth are the index sui et falsi, the standard of themselves and their other. So yeah. And I would like to read a passage by the editor or the commentator of the book by Frege. I found it beautiful and comical, and it's wonderful. He says, logic is not as easy as one might think. It's not easy to the point of becoming a disdainful. It should not be a cause of disdain because of the easy aspect of logic, but it should not bring you a lack of courage because of its difficult aspect. My English is terrible, but I just expressed the idea. So neither the easiness nor the difficulty should bring negative emotions to you. But the question is, why should we bother studying logic? Why be interested in logic? And he says that there's only one acceptable answer. One should not imagine that logic is the gateway to happiness. Maybe it is. But logic should not be sought for the sake of happiness, not even for bringing the key to rationality. If we are not interested in logic, we will not die of misery, or unhappiness. We will not necessarily wander in the clouds of irrationality. He says logic is not something that we advise or recommend or encourage for the sake of utility. We recommend studying logic because it is a good in itself. So logic is not useful for an external purpose. It can be used for discovering the truth in the sciences, for thinking correctly, for judging the truth or the falsehood of things. But he says that in its highest truth, logic is the good in itself. It's the end of itself. It's the highest good. It has no need outside of its self-subsistence existence. And this is what Aristotle said, that the highest good is theoretical thinking, because it has no externality. Thinking and purely thinking is the highest good, because it is not a means to attain a higher end. It is a means in itself. And yeah, Aristotle said that the highest good is thought, thinking itself, and speculation and theoretical understanding, and there is no other good which would exist outside or beyond pure logic, thinking itself. So yeah, and then the comical aspect, I love this. I love this sentence. He says, "Why study logic? Why go to the opera? Why open a bottle of champagne?" I find this so funny, and I love it. That was just an anecdote. Another anecdote. I already mentioned it in one of my previous videos, but I repeat it. I made an IQ test a few months ago because I doubted my intelligence, and I believed that my IQ would be 105 because I knew that I had good grades in school when I was younger, that I was capable of understanding broadly certain ideas. So I thought I probably have an IQ of 105, and I secretly hoped that it could be 110. And the IQ test revealed that, with a margin of error, of course, it might be more or less, and it's in France, and the IQ, average IQ in France is not the same as in England or the United States or Asian countries, but it was 131. So according to this test, I am, as an empirical individual, intelligent. But my result in the matrix of logic, the purely logical matrices, as they call it, it was 105, which was one of my lowest scores in the various mental tests. And truth be told, after I made the test, I should have been happy, because it's pleasant to know yourself as being intelligent, although intelligence can be and is a burden, because sometimes it's easier not to think too much, and thinking things through can be a burden and can be exhausting and painful. I know that. But I was more disappointed than joyful, because I am not a good logician. I am slightly more logical than the average population of my age in a country like France, where the average IQ is relatively high. It's I think 90, 98, but it may have dropped, so it may be slightly inferior, but it's around the standard of Anglo-Saxon IQ. It's slightly below, but yeah. But I am slightly more logical than the average person, but I am not very good at logic, and this causes a great suffering in me, and I feel disappointment, and I feel a lack, because logic, I love it, and I don't like myself for being unable to be a great logical thinker like the scientists, the physicists, because I know myself that I could never understand scientific books and scientific works, because it requires a very high logical IQ, and I lack this. And my only healing medicine is that Hegel's logic is beyond ordinary logic, so you can grasp Hegel's logic without necessarily being a good classical logician. But I must admit that I have this pain in me, the fact that I suffer from from a lack of scientific intelligence in the classical sense, in the sense that when I read books about physics and theoretical physics and complex mathematical books, I reach my limit, and I don't understand. I am not sufficiently intelligent to understand everything, and in order to understand all the books ever written, one must probably have an IQ of 150 and a very high logical IQ. So yeah, but fortunately, Hegel taught me that truth is made available to all independently of their intelligence through the mediation of religion and art. And yeah, but that was an anecdote. So my relationship with logic is, I think that it is the highest good, the greatest good, and I feel joy and satisfaction when I read theoretical books, and when I understand the coherence, the order, the rationality, the structure, and it is beautiful for the mind. It is a intellectually satisfying and beautiful and joyful experience to grasp the intellectual and logical structure of a work. And logic could be said to be artistic in a way. A good logical book is a work of art, and a good work of art has a hidden logical structure. And yeah, I just wanted to say that. I will make other videos, because this was a video about personal anecdotes, so it's not very interesting, but at least you know me better.